the label stays on the container, or replace it right away with a workplace label if it becomes torn or unreadable. If you find a container without a label, don't handle it. Contact your supervisor. You have a right to refuse to handle material if you don't know what it is. If you see this symbol on a container in your workplace, handle it with extreme caution. It is a poisonous substance that may cause serious health effects. On January 10, 1997, Michelle Moore went to work as usual. Her job that day was to clean metal panels in preparation for painting. At her workstation, Michelle prepared to pour nitric acid from a large storage drum into a smaller container. She was careful to apply a workplace label on the container, as she had been trained to do. The symbol on the label identified the contents as corrosive material. Michelle was wearing her personal protective equipment, with the exception of her face shield. Michelle was able to get to an eye wash station quickly. Luckily, she took the correct first aid measures and only suffered minor burns. Had Michelle worn the proper personal protective equipment, she would not have been injured at all. Michelle learned the hard way. When you're handling a corrosive material, you can't afford to skip any safety steps. If you work with hazardous materials, make sure you read the labels. Talk to your supervisor about it. And if you need more information, read the MSDS. Know the first aid measures for each hazardous material you handle. Don't assume that what applies to one chemical would apply to another. When handling corrosives which have this symbol, wear all the required protective gear at all times. Keep in mind that many corrosives are strong enough to eat through metal. Think of what they can do to you. On October 12, 1994, Chris was loading a supply of compressed gas cylinders for a welding project. Taking off, the cylinder hit the guardrail and barely missed him. However, a co-worker driving a lift truck was not as fortunate. The cylinder knocked him off his lift truck and onto a pile of metal parts where he lay seriously injured. How could this accident have been prevented? Had Chris used safe transporting procedures, this incident would not have happened. It's important to use valve covers and have them securely in place. And it is equally important to secure the tanks with a chain or similar device while storing or transporting them. Cylinders containing compressed gas must be identified by this WHMIS symbol. Liquefied by pressure, this substance may also be highly reactive to heat, flame, or other chemicals. Some compressed gases are also toxic, corrosive, or can cause frostbite if released. That's why you may see these other symbols on the label as well. Compressed gas cylinders must be stored securely in a cool, dry place. Before handling it, be sure to read about the specific product. When you see this symbol on a container, it means that the contents is under pressure. Your employer is responsible for training you in the proper use of this potentially dangerous material. It's your responsibility to use this information. You may see a WHMIS label with this symbol in your workplace. It means that the material inside is an oxidizer. Oxidizers cause other materials to catch fire by supplying the oxygen they need to burn. Take acetylene, for example. Acetylene does not burn very well, but when oxygen is added, enough heat is generated to burn metal. If you work with combustible materials and oxidizers, arm yourself with knowledge. When you see a supplier or workplace label, read it. If you come across a hazardous material that is missing a label, don't work with it until you know what's in the container. If you need more information, read the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS, which comes with the product. This data sheet has more technical information. Watch out for oxidizers. Keep them away from flammable and combustible materials. For many years, Ken Belby worked for an auto parts rebuilding company. His job was to repair parts that could be recycled for final assembly. Degreaser solvent was used to remove grease and dirt from the parts. How could a knowledge of WHMIS help him to protect his health and safety on the job? A, Ken would have notified his supervisor that the supplier label was not readable. B, the MSDS would have told him how the material could enter his body and affect his health. C, Ken would have learned the proper handling procedures, including the correct personal protective equipment to use. If you picked A, you are correct. Ken would have told his supervisor that the supplier label was not readable. A workplace label would have been applied to replace the damaged supplier label. The workplace label has 3 essential elements. These are the name of the hazardous material, how to work with it safely, reference to the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. If you pick B, you're also correct. If Ken had known about WHMIS and checked the MSDS for the solvent he was using, he would have known that this class of chemical may cause long-term health effects. If you picked C, right again. Ken would have known how to work with the chemical safely. Let's go back. Ken worked with the chemical for years without proper safety equipment. He had no knowledge of the harmful effects of the material. Gradually, a serious problem did occur. Ken developed dermatitis, a painful skin disease that forced him to seek treatment. Ken didn't know it, but over time, the toxic chemical had entered his body in 3 ways. Through breathing, as he inhaled vapors. Through swallowing, while eating lunch. Ken's hands were often covered in the chemical, which he transferred to his food. The material also passed through Ken's skin while he worked and entered his bloodstream. Although Ken became ill, his doctor told him he was lucky. The toxic chemical could have affected his kidneys, liver, or other internal organs. When you see this symbol, it means that the material is toxic, and you will need to know how to protect yourself.